My sister's so-called soulmate named Warner. My sister is 72 years old, 8 years older than me and retired. She's been on social media for ages, but since her retirement from her part-time job, which kept her a little busy, her life and world got smaller and more into social media, specifically watching TikTok videos. She has a profile on there, but doesn't really make videos, but her days are spent scrolling. And I wish I'd been more involved in her life so I knew what was going on. But I still work full time, and while we did meet up weekly for lunch, I wish I'd known that romance scammers lurked on TikTok. When I think of romance scammers, I think of dating apps. My sister doesn't know that I'm telling her story, so I'd like to let her be known as Deborah. We live in Montana in a pretty rural, small town. I think living where we do added to her isolation, as we're not exactly the hub of entertainment. Plus, the winters are long here, and my sister being isolated, it really didn't help matters. She met this guy who told her his name was Warner on TikTok. He had sent her a message and replied to a few of her comments she had made on some cooking videos. And he started following her, and his profile, from what I've seen of it, was blank with the exception of one video uploaded, and it was just photos of himself along to music. So it wasn't a live video that was made, just a collage of pictures set to a romance song. Warner told her that he was 68 years old and worked as a construction engineer. He was a widow whose wife had died 14 years ago in a terrible accident. My sister's husband passed away 8 years ago, and she's been on her own since. He was a great man, and unfortunately, her protector, which, while not a bad thing, when he died, it left her without someone to point out the bad in the world, if that makes sense to your viewers. This Warner lured her to chat on WhatsApp and also asked her if she's on Facebook, to which, of course, she was. He told her that he was originally from Norway but moved to the States when he met his wife, and they lived in Texas until she passed away. He told her that he worked overseas doing engineering for building projects for some fictitious company called Blue Eck Building International Construction, which, upon searching, there's no such company. They started talking on WhatsApp pretty frequently from the chats I've read after this whole ordeal. He told her he had a daughter who is 16 who was away at a UK boarding school. He then told her he was going to Malaysia for a work contract, and after he returned, he wanted to come and meet her and visit. He'd be gone for 6 months, and my sister seemed to be okay with it because she said this would give her time to prepare to meet him. She even told him that she wanted to lose some weight and work out some so that she could walk better, as she had a bad knee and she felt she would keep him down if she wasn't fit and able to walk. This guy told her it was a great idea and she needed to start eating healthy fruits and vegetables. From her chat logs on WhatsApp, they looked to have talked mostly late at night. He would send her poems and links to romantic songs, photos of wedding rings. He really laid it on thick, telling her that she was his soulmate, and he's never loved so strongly, and my sister Deb was lapping it all up. Now, I meet with my sister once a week for lunch. It's a way for us to catch up with each other, and the first time I noticed something was off was about 3 weeks into her relationship. She never once mentioned she was dating someone online, but I noticed how sleepy and tired she looked and acted as we ate lunch. It was around 1 p.m. My sister was half asleep while we talked, and she kept yawning. When I asked her what was going on, she told me that she had been hooked on a few TV series and stayed up too late watching TV. When I asked her which series she's watching, she changed the subject and started talking about my house, gardening, and things I'm planning to do for spring. The first time this took place, I kind of ignored it, thinking, well, she's retired and TV watching is her thing, so being tired, while it was odd, was totally plausible because, yeah, she stayed up too late watching TV. We've all done it. It was about 2 more weeks when more red flags came out, though. My sister looked to have lost some weight, and while she was not obese, she was a little chunky. So I thought she was working on losing weight for her knee, which by itself would be great to help her knee, but she looked to have lost about a good 15 pounds and she looked extremely tired. She had bags under her eyes and she kept yawning and tearing up as we ate due to the excessive yawning. I asked her if she was sick or had she been sick, and she said no, that she was just staying up watching TV and had been watching health videos on TikTok to help her lose weight. I was so concerned that I snuck a picture of her while we had lunch to show my husband, as this was just so out of pocket. During these weeks of concern, from reading her chat logs after the fact, it looked like this Warner guy was asking for iTunes cards. He had apparently made it to Malaysia on his business trip and told her his phone wasn't working, and in order for them to keep communicating, she would need to buy him iTunes cards as his bank account wasn't working there. My sister had been sending him anywhere from $100 to $500 cards at a time. Warner kept telling her that her weight loss is working and she should cut back eating more, and it would save money. There were a few times my sister had told him in the chat that she can't afford to buy cards and pay her bills. This is when this guy told her to cut her food back so she can afford the cards, as they have to keep chatting and he was going to be her husband and they would marry soon. He was extremely manipulative and controlling. It looks like he would call her from 11 p.m. on until 5 or 6 in the morning and they would voice chat. There were a few times he told her that he would come visit soon, when his contract was over. This is when she mentioned she wanted to tell me about the relationship. Warner was very strongly controlling in this. He told her not to tell her family or friends until he arrived at her home so they could surprise her family and friends together as a couple and announce their engagement. He then sent photos of rings to my sister and told her to pick one out that she likes the best. She picked out a ring and he apparently mailed her a package with the ring. During these weeks, my husband and I made a point to ask her over for dinner. We thought it would be a good idea to see how she's doing and talk to her during the evening hours, seeing that if she stays up all night watching TV, that maybe she would be more aware and awake at 7 p.m. for a late dinner. And boy, was that a mistake. Deb came by for dinner looking frazzled and tired. Her hair was messy and she came over in sweatpants and a sweater. Now, my sister always dressed nice, even if we were just going shopping at Walmart. She wore nice boots, leggings, dress pants, and lovely tops, and her hair had always been done with makeup. As long as my sister's been an adult, she's worn makeup and always dressed nice and had her hair dyed. It was shocking to see her this way, looking so disheveled. She came into our home very frazzled. She went directly to the table to eat when dinner wasn't even ready. We usually have a drink in the living room, chat, maybe listen to music, have family time. Well, this was not the time. My sister was rushed, asking what we're eating and constantly on her phone like a teenager. When I asked her what was going on, she told me nothing, that she was supposed to be in an online casino game tournament and had to keep refreshing her spot in line, but I could clearly see she was typing to someone on a chat app. We had what felt like a rushed dinner, and during dinner her phone kept ringing and she would shut it down and reject the call. I asked her who's calling. She told me it was her alarm for her game and they have to call her to let her know that her turn is coming up. This all sounded fishy, and she rushed through dinner, no dessert, and said she had to get home. I told her I was worried for her, and she said she's fine, to stop worrying. She left and went home. And when we looked at our chat logs during this time frame, we had come to discover Warner had been messaging her and telling her that she needs to go home. She had texted him that she was at our house, at our family home, and having dinner. And he told her to hurry, get home, but first stop at the store and get a couple of iTunes cards, and then she needed to hurry home and not say anything to her family. He apparently was constantly voice calling her during the time, and she was at our house, and she had declined the calls, but he told her several more times not to tell her family about us, as we'd be home soon and be a couple. If this whole thing wasn't out of control already, my sister got caught up in some scams in the form of check fraud. Warner was sending my sister checks in the mail from people which he claimed was from his company he worked for, but he was unable to cash or deposit checks as he was in Malaysia and running out of money and his bank account was frozen and his company was having accountants send checks to her. his now apparent wife. And she cashed them for him and forwarded him the money in the form of loadable vanilla Visa cards and iTunes cards, which she sent him in the chat. She started receiving thousands of dollars in checks, which she would cash, deposit in her bank account, and then use the money to load these vanilla prepaid Visas and iTunes cards to give them to Warner in the chat. This went on for weeks, on top of her buying iTunes and something called a Razor Gold card for him out of her own money. My sister started to skip out on our lunch dates and started shutting herself in. However, she would go out to buy the iTunes cards from the chats, and it apparently got to the point where in town they knew her at the local shops as the iTunes lady. And when the cards were sold out, she went to our local corner gas station, Quick Mart, to buy those cards to the tune of almost $1,000 a week at the height of all this. I paid a visit to my sister unexpectedly one morning, and she, of course, looked very tired, wearing sweats and an old sweater. Her house was absolutely freezing, and she had one truck, because she had two. One was a summer vehicle, and one was a winter one. One of her trucks was for sale. When I asked her why and what's going on, she became snippy with me, telling me that all would be revealed soon. That she was selling her truck as she doesn't go to town often in the summer, and it was just an old pickup, and she was keeping her dually with the snow tire truck for winter and summer. Well, this made no sense, as my sister's had two trucks for as long as I can remember. When I went to turn on the heat for the house, she got angry, telling me she needs to preserve the propane. And when I asked her why in the world are you doing that when you have more than enough money and you have it filled, she told me she cut back on her service to save money. She's not getting her propane refilled as often. At this point, between the disheveled clothing, truck for sale, cold house, her weight loss, which she now looked underweight, I had major red flags waving in my face. I told her if she doesn't tell me what's going on, I was going to call adult services because she's clearly changing and I wanted a mental evaluation on her. Well, this sent my sister into a rage, and she told me that she never wants me to be happy and that Warner said if you knew about the relationship that you would become jealous and break it up. I had no idea what she meant and told her to bring him over because whomever this man is, he's ruined her. She then told me she met him online. And I think by the time she was tired when she confessed everything. She told me he was working in Malaysia and coming home next week, so please don't ruin a perfect thing. When I asked her where she met him, she said on TikTok, and he has a daughter who will come home from the boarding school in UK, and they're also going to meet in London and then fly to her house in 2 weeks. She showed me a few photos of him, which to me looked like some kind of clothing model, and to be frank, the pictures looked ridiculous. During my time at my sister's, the mailman came and brought several boxes and letters, all checks. The boxes she let sit, and I noticed they were from all over the U.S., Texas, Georgia, Nevada, and from different women's names. She told me those were Warner's personal documents she needs to hold on to until he returns to be here with her. The letters, though, were checks written to her from people from all over from various amounts. She had 4 checks in total, which were worth over $6,000 between all of them, each one from a different person. And one check, I told her it looks fake. She told me it's real and it's Warner's payroll checks from his work in Malaysia and his bank account is frozen and he needs her to cash the checks. She made me promise not to tell anyone as it would upset Warner. I told her I have concerns and all this seems off. She quickly wanted me to leave as she had to run errands, get to the bank. And upon exiting my sister's house, I went out a different exit. I usually go through the front door, but instead I left out the laundry room door on the side, which my sister uses often instead of her front door as it's by her driveway. She keeps her keys in a big bowl by the door, and I glanced down and saw stacks of iTunes and prepaid gift cards. She basically pushed and shuffled me out, and I didn't have a chance to stop and ask, as I couldn't believe all the cards. There must have been $1,000 worth or more. I told my husband what happened, and he said it sounded like she's involved with some sort of fraud. I told him that I knew the guy's name was Warner, and we checked her Facebook, and sure enough, she was friends with a guy with that name and the same photo. His profile was very basic. It had his first and last name, a profile picture, said he was a mechanical building engineer for this blue whatever company, and he was a widow. His URL for his profile, however, was different from the name, and it was a long African sounding name, which, when we searched, came up as a Nigerian name. We knew something was going on, and that something wasn't good. We decided to meet with my sister, invite her to dinner again so it can be on our terms in our home. And she surprisingly did come over, but she was clearly upset. We confronted her with the information we had, and I think she reached her breaking point. She told us she had been in a relationship with this Warner for nearly 6 months. He was set to come home next week to see her, but that the company he worked for was unable to cover the expenses of the building materials for his $8 million project, and the shipping container had capsized, and some of the material was lost at sea, and what was salvaged was bent and damaged. He needed $15,000 to cover the cost, otherwise, he'd lose his job and his contract money, and he was so close to coming home to being with her forever. My sister had managed to cash out some stocks and savings that she had sent him close to $9,000 of the 15, but needed more, so she was trying to sell her truck quickly. My husband just about came unglued and started yelling at her, telling her it's a scam and showing her the name on the profile of the URL. It's some sort of scammer. At first, my sister refused to believe, but in her heart, I could tell she knew. She told us that her bank was investigating her for fraud as she had cashed over $10,000 in checks over the course of the 5.5 months, and some of the checks were from people who filed fraud reports. Some checks were fake and bounced, and she was in debt to the banks, also pending an investigation. This nightmare got deeper as she was so far in debt she couldn't afford propane refills for her home heating. She spent literally every penny she had buying iTunes cards and gift cards. When we went through her phone, it was sad. It was her begging for this man's love and not to leave her, that she would somehow come up with the rest of the money. He played her emotions like a fiddle and told her she would have to get the money or he'll end things and that he thinks she needs to lose more weight. My sister was already at a 60-pound weight loss, and trust me, she didn't need to lose that much. She looked sickly. The stress and lack of money for food was taking a toll along with late night phone chats. It looks like Warner was calling her all day and night, keeping her awake and on her toes, demanding she buy more cards, cash more checks, and when she told him about the bank fraud, he said she was crazy and didn't know what she was talking about and didn't understand everything. He said he was so confused, and he'll be home soon, and as soon as she paid the amount he asked for, and his daughter was waiting. My sister also sent money to some woman in the UK who apparently was the boarding school director to pay for his daughter's tuition. The bulk of the money that she sent in cash was sent via wire transfer to, no surprise, the man whose name was on the URL of the Warner profile, but it went to Malaysia. We finally convinced my sister she's being scammed. She gave her phone to us to really review things, and during this time, this guy kept calling and calling. My husband finally answered and told him the jig is up. We know he's a scammer, and told him his real name. He paused and asked for Deborah, and just to put her on the phone, he would yell and say, "What's the meaning of this? Put her on the phone right now. I'm so confused." We ignored him and told him that the FBI is tracking him. They weren't, but we thought maybe it would scare him off. He just hung up. We blocked him from her Facebook and removed WhatsApp from her phone after downloading the entire relationship into a text message log. It was shocking how he convinced her of his so called love. He told her that he was going to marry her and bring his daughter, who apparently was emailing her and calling her mom, so they could be together as one big happy family. The manipulation of this guy was absolutely shocking. The phone calls all hours of the day and night. I suspect he was working with others to do this scam, as there's no humanly way possible this man could have stayed online 24/7 calling and texting, but this Warner profile certainly did. My sister had not slept good in months, and he wouldn't let her sleep for an hour, then maybe call again, sleep for 20 minutes, and he'd call again. It was ridiculous. My sister went off social media, went off TikTok, and went off all the game sites. She ended up having to file a police report, and her income loss was mind blowing. By the end of everything, she was over $30,000 in debt between the loans she took out, cashing out her savings and stock sell off, and the amount she owed the bank for bounced and fraudulent check fees, and the stacks of iTunes and gift cards. We added up the cards, and she easily spent over $5,000 in just iTunes cards alone, 50 and $100 at a time, and a handful of $500 cards. We ended up taking over her financial care and having total control of her finances now. She's paying back the banks and hopefully won't face jail time given the circumstances. We've had to change her phone number as this Warner, or whoever he is, called her from all sorts of numbers and even called telling her that his daughter was being held hostage and he needed ransom money. This guy or these guys didn't stop. It was crazy. They played with her physically and mentally, all from across the ocean. Since this incident, my husband and myself, we get messages on social media from unknown people and suspicious looking profiles. My husband even got threats from some profiles because he was the one that shut the scammer down from taking any more money from my sister. Please watch your loved ones, especially if you see even the slightest change in their behavior, sudden weight loss, change of clothing, hair, not caring anymore about their appearance, or acting like they're in a hurry when they're meeting you, constantly looking or on their phone, taking phone calls and leaving the room and acting secretively. All these things are huge red flags. Notice them and don't be afraid to ask questions. Romance scammers are all over, not just on dating apps. They lurk in every site, from an innocent gaming app to social media, dating sites, and beyond. Be there for your family and watch for the signs. Thank you for letting our family share my sister's encounter. And we'd like to thank this lady for sharing her story. Unfortunately, this is a very common type of romance scam, and a lot of romance scammers like to keep their target victims up all hours of the day and night. A lot of scammers work in shifts and they'll call and text at all hours, and the manipulation is very real. If you'd like to share your encounter with a romance scammer or a friend and family member that had a romance scam encounter, you can find us scammingscammers@gmail.com. Just drop us an email there and we can go ahead and narrate your story into a video. Any screenshots, photos, whatever you have to show proof of the incident helps us to verify your story and then narrate it into a video. If you need help with a romance scammer, you're not sure, you can also find us on FB, Scamming Cyber Education. Our inbox is there to help you as well. Until next time, stay safe, take care of yourself, and take care of your friends and family.